welcome one and all to today. The only one, a good one. Let's make it a great one. I am your host, Cassius Always Solomon. It's blessed and honored to be here. So glad that you have tuned into Aspire. Aspire is a webinar designed to inform us and empower us to live our best lives physically, mentally, financially, and socially. And we're typically just online, but today we are on site at the Tall Rabbit. So thank you, Tall Rabbit, for allowing us to be here in the space. Before we get started, let's take a moment to respect the pause. And in respecting the pause, we're going to do two things. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a moment of prayer. And the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to do this exercise that I just love to do is just in saying our name. I love us just to acknowledge us in existence, acknowledge our presence, acknowledge that we're here today. So before we say our names, let's just have this moment of prayer. I invite you into this space. If prayer is something that you're not accustomed to doing, please feel free to join us or to mute us and join us again in a second. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord. We thank you for today. We ask that you open up our hearts, our minds, and our ears to what it is that we're about to receive. Lord, just bless us in this time, bless us in this space, and continue to guide us and be with us on our journey as we move forward. It's in Jesus' name that we pray these things. Thank you, God. Amen. Amen. Thank you all for that. And now I just want us to have this space. Just say our name. So just say your name out loud. There's no order sequence of doing it. So right now I'm just going to say my name, Cassius Saul.
My name is Kyle Huntington. My name is Kyle Lumber.
Excellent, excellent. And those of you online, yes, those of you online, I hope you're joining in and just stating your name, making your presence known, knowing that you are in existence in today. And so for today's conversation of Aspire, we're inside of what are we marching for? What are we marching for? We're having this discussion because there's a lot of things that are happening in today's society. There's a lot of things happening in the world and in our city. And a lot of times when these things occur, we often take a stance of just saying, I don't like it, or I don't like seeing that happen, and when I say that, I'm speaking about violence. I'm speaking about, gun violence, violence in the sense of just people fighting, people not agreeing with one another. And when those things occur, we often, again, just say we don't like them or we don't want to see these things happen. But what would it mean for us to take a stance in this, to take a stance in against it and to come around an idea of being proactive against it and not just allowing these things to occur and then us doing something, but us actually moving towards proactiveness and avoiding these things. And so today we're going to have some space to find out what it means to be nonviolent, what exactly the term means, and we're going to learn different communication strategies, and we're going to talk about peaceful community. And we have two wonderful folks with us here to talk about that. And so now I'm going to give them this space to kind of introduce themselves and where they serve.
Agent for Beauty.
You ain't lying. I am Angelo Manti. I am the executive director of Alive Community Outreach, which is a pretty new nonprofit. We got launched officially in 2020, but did some groundwork for a few years before that to get it off the ground. But I'm also an ordained United Methodist pastor. So my secondary appointment is at First Wayne Street United Methodist downtown. That's also where all of our offices are for Alive.
Yes, and I'm Josh King. I am the director of community engagement at a little place called Neighborlink Fort Wayne. We are a group of people who are trying to encourage our community to learn to serve one another. And so we do that through a platform that we are able to show the needs in our community, predominantly around home. And so I just go around and make sure that our community is seen and they're loved. And I encourage other people to go out and serve their community. I work a little bit with Angelo and what they're doing. And yeah, just on a journey of life, trying to figure it out.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for being here. We'll spend our time. I'll just ask you guys some questions and then we'll allow the audience to ask some questions at the end there. But where we want to start is, again, just what is this, non-violence? Because I know that there's a term where there's a non-hyphen violence and then there's another term where it's just non-violence. So what does that mean?
So And most of what I have to say about nonviolence comes out of the Kingian tradition. So I've been trained Kingian nonviolence. It's a big part of what we do with Alive. And so um, there's a lot of nuances with Kingian nonviolence, but one of those is the distinction between non-dash violence or non-hyphen violence and non-violence, all one word. So non-hyphen violence, or the dash, when you see that dash, think of a minus sign, right? So it's a negative piece, what Dr. King called it. It's the negation of violence, which of course we want to end violence. We want to stop violence wherever we see it. But what that also means is that you can have a situation where there may not be violence on the surface, but underneath there's injustices, right? That may not have erupted into conflict or violence. Nonviolence, all one word, is a proactive, positive framework and approach to not just ending violence, but to achieving justice. So Dr. King said, and this is something most people have heard somewhere, and he said it in multiple different writings. Letter from a Birmingham jail is one of them, but he said that the true peace or positive peace is not just the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. And so that's what nonviolence, like all one word, entails. That's the idea that it's getting at.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So it's that actionable step versus just it not being there, moving towards, actual against nonviolence. Well, thank you. So what are some of these challenges that the community faces when it comes to violence? And what are the things that we're seeing happening? And then, what are the ways that we can address those things?
Yeah, I think going in vain just what Angela was saying, I think King talks about the triple evils. And again, there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. And a lot of people with King too, I always say like when he spoke about the triple evils, they go against a lot of things that we're kind of been born into and ingrained into us as Americans. And the triple evils were poverty, racism, and militarism. Those three things, and they're all interconnected. And it's not like it's just militarism here and then poverty here, racism. They're all interconnected, they're all interweaved. And so those three things, those triple evils, kind of perpetuate violence within our community, within our place of where we live. And so I don't know if you want to break those three things down because there's a little more detail that goes into it, but they perpetuate the violence that we see, not only just here, but abroad. And so, yeah, I think, I know we can go into those three things.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are lots of challenges. I'm not sure where to look. I'm kind of awkward.
Either way.
Okay, and so there's lots of challenges. So what got me into this whole work was my cousin was murdered back in 2016. So we know gun violence is a huge issue. And that happened into my family. That opened up a whole new awareness for me. And I had friends that were killed from high school. And so I wasn't completely naive to that issue, but have it happening to our family just raised a whole new level of consciousness about that issue in particular. That's what got me into it. And then, looking at what's happened, when you look at the last 10, 15 years in our city, it's the worst stretch on record for homicides.
Mm-hmm.
So homicides is a problem, but now we're working in Southside High School, and we got into this because wanting to do something proactive to address the issue of gun violence, homicides, but we're dealing with all kinds of trauma, sexual violence and self-harm and mental health stuff. There's just a lot that's going on, challenges that we're facing of violence in our community. But to Josh's point, I think one thing that I've really learned over the past 7, 8 years is that we often talk about and try to address violence as if violence is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And violence is not a problem. In this community, in any community, it's never been a problem. It's a symptom. It's always a symptom of something else. And so when my brother here is talking about the triple evils, when we look at even violent statistics in Fort Wayne, like if you look, we have data that goes back over 25 years and looking at the concentration of homicides in Fort Wayne, the southeast quadrant. That just is what it is. I got bar graphs to show it. I live south. I love the south, but that's one of the issues that we've experienced over the past couple decades. It's changing.
Yeah.
It's changing last couple years. I think things are definitely, it's spreading out into other areas of the city, but looking at that concentration, it's like, okay, why is that?
Yeah.
Why is that? Let's not just take it at face value. And just, it is what it is, but why is that the case? And then when you start breaking down other things, why are there health disparities in this part of the city? Why is there a higher level of poverty in this, even race? Why is there a higher concentration of people of color in this part? There's history, right? And when you have systemic issues of race and poverty, and then you deal with issues of crime with higher levels of incarceration and all of that, it's just this cycle that doesn't end well. And so those are the types of things when we're talking about the triple evils of these root issues that form the conditions for violence and harm at the individual level and at the community level.
Yeah, and I would say too, like they're deep-seated things like that have been baked within some of our culture and our society. And I think a lot of things too, it's like when we do talk about these symptoms, because yes, like I see it as like, like we have a tree and you have roots, right? And so a lot of these things have produced roots that have been deeply ingrained when you don't know what, like, unless you're living within the southeast side of Fort Wayne, how much of these disparities are actually happening. But I think so many times too, it's like we try to end violence by saying, well, we'll get rid of this or we do this, without actually dealing with the roots of violence, of what's actually happening within our community. And so, I
often say, like, a lot of the solutions is like we're spraying the top of the flame, trying to put out a fire by spraying the top of the flames,
right.
Where the whole time it's underneath that we need to be focusing to try to stop the blaze.
So what are some of those things that you guys have seen done or be done where they do kind of get to addressing those actual roots and the bottoms of those flames?
There you go. I got a lot to say, but I've age for beauty. Such a say over here.
So, man, I mean, I think the work that we're doing at Southside, I mean, is exactly what we're trying to do there. And now we're at Southside and Northrop, and soon the other 3 FWCS high schools. At that level, we're not doing much right now, kind of at the neighborhood or larger community level. We're really just trying to focus on the macro level of the school, seeing the school as its own environment and a lot of it, because one of those root issues is trauma, untreated trauma, unaddressed trauma, the stuff that these kids are coming to school with every single day. And you got, at Southside High School, we got 1,400 some students, and the other schools are bigger than that. And a lot of those students are carrying so much weight, and have so much trauma that hasn't been dealt with. And so a big part of our work that we're doing there is trying to create spaces for students to be heard. And we do that directly. And if there's a deeper issue, a mental health issue that requires more than what we're able to give, being able to connect students to therapists, to counselors, and putting people around them that can really give them the support that they need. And that's especially for the students when you see, and what I love about Fort Wayne Community Schools right now is that there's a bigger emphasis that I've ever seen on restorative practices and restorative justice. Like if a kid is acting out, like, wow, what's going on, right? Like if there's a pattern of behavior, or if you have a kid maybe where there's not a pattern, but then all of a sudden they erupt,
Right.
We had a student, because another side of our work is we work with families who've been affected by homicide. And early on in this process, I think back in 2017 or 2018, there was a young girl that we were working with, and she had lost her father. So we were working with the family. But then she lost her uncle like a couple years later, and he had taken on that father figure role in her life, and she just erupted. Like she like threw computers down in the class and stuff, and like she got in trouble. And but then, you know, we were able to kind of advocate for her and help her through that process. And like the school, that like they didn't even know like what happened, right? Because there was no communication from the family to the school as to what happened. So that's the work that we're trying to do, and I think the work that the school system is trying to do with those students that are exhibiting violent or problematic behaviors. What's really going on with them, so that we can get to the bottom of it, give them the support that they need, and hopefully be able to see them thrive.
Yeah, I would say for me, I think what we do at NeighborLink, why I used to work at a church too. And one of the beautiful things about NeighborLink is King talks about trying to arrive at beloved community, and NeighborLink, what we're trying to do is I believe, like for me, is like live that dream out. And so what we do is like we go to different quadrants of the city, and most of our projects are on the southeast side of Fort Wayne, right? And so these are people who feel like they're not seen, feel like they're not heard or loved. And so we get to go in those spaces, and I tell people all the time, like allowing someone in your home is very vulnerable. I don't think we understand that a lot sometimes. Like that's a wall that's being brought down because that's your home, that's your safe space. And so what we do, what I try to do with at least with a neighboring, is like we get to have conversations, we get to develop friendships, community building. When we go and do a simple project as like mowing a lawn, right? Or trimming hedges or whatever. And so they see volunteers, or even just like people who normally would not live on their side of town, come and like just love and have no agenda. We talk about that a lot too. It's like you're not here to do anything but just serve and love this neighbor in this moment. And so also about taking time to cultivate that relationship with the neighbor. So that means coming back to that same house 2, 3, 4 times and doing the same thing over and over again. And so I think just trying to strive to create that beloved community where we're trying to bring down walls and barriers between neighbors. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, so a lot of what you guys said is, you know, it sounded like a lot of identifying the individual, you know, identifying whom this person is. You know, there may be something going on with them, causing them to act a certain way, but really knowing who this person is, taking that time with that person. You guys spoke to, you know, this community space, you know, and that's kind of why we said our name at that beginning, you know, acknowledging ourselves, but then it's acknowledging those around us as well, because that's important, you know, as we navigate and build it. It's acknowledging individual and acknowledging each other and figuring out ways, you know, to keep building, you know, community. But as we build community, oftentimes, you know, there's conflicting thoughts on different things, and how do we, you know, come together around things when we don't see it the same.
Yeah, I mean, so we've been talking mainly about like kind of the individual at the individual level, and I think the non-violence, the framework, especially, you know, coming out of King, Gandhi, was to address larger social, you know, issues too. And so like that, so I want to make sure that we address that as well, that it's important to vote, to get involved politically, to be informed as far as you know, what are those economic barriers that you know, that us, you know, nonprofits are kind of trying to work, you know, to and meet direct needs on the ground. But you know, how can we address those disparities at that level? But you know, politically right now, like we're just so divided, and like, and that trickles down, you know, into, you know, Josh was a pastor in the church, you know, I'm in the church, and it's trickled down into the church, you know, where like, it's like everything just so, and this being an election year, I think we've lost the capacity um, to listen to each other, to really try to understand. I think we go into conversations with people we disagree with an agenda um, to, you know, get our points. And social media, I think, has played a big part into that, because it's very like, you know, I speak, you know, and then you know, and then you're just sitting there waiting for the response, and you know, it creates this false dialogue, because it's divorced from relationship.
Yeah.
And you know, I just had a conversation. I won't say who it is, but it's you know, a guy I'm friends with, two guys I'm friends with, and they both are on complete polar opposite sides of the whole situation of what's going on in Gaza right now. And like they're about to get coffee, and they like they're friends, they're cool, you know, they just want to get together just to talk,
Right.
you know, and they could just as easily get on Facebook and spout off and just, you know, but no, like, so I think it's possible. And King modeled that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the, like I mentioned, letter from Birmingham jail, I love the way that letter ends.
Yeah.
Where, you know, he goes in, like he goes in
Yeah.
that letter, but he ends it like with the genuine desire that, you know, I look forward to the time when we can get together, not to talk about, you know, have this intense discussion, but just to sit at the table of brotherhood and enjoy a meal together. You know, it's like he had that desire, and I think that's the posture that is missing, that we need. Whether we're dealing with kids in the schools that are just having a conflict, and we just need to sit them down and try to understand, you know, what the harm that's been done and the perspectives that led to that conflict, or kind of at a larger political level. I think that's one of the biggest issues with activism right now.
Yes.
It's like, I think that there's a stream of activism that is doing the work that's needed and speaking up out on issues but it's doing so in a spirit, not of the end goal being reconciliation, but the end goal being victory.
Yes. And that's what I was gonna even I think there's again, I being involved, trying to get educated, and it seems like it tends to be the besetting sin of certain sides, like moral grandstanding. So like I have the level up of knowing like, oh, I'm on the right side of history, which again, like, you know, hindsight's 2020, and a lot of people say, well, if I was alive during King's time, I would have been marching with it. I was like, I don't think you would, but but like, let's acknowledge, like, let's have some self-awareness about like, yeah, like you probably wouldn't be. But at the same time, like it's just also this thing of, and I've heard it really well. It's like we need to the scriptures talk about like being slow to anger, right? And being quick. Like I think we're so not ready or listening, like to be quick to listen. We're always wanting to share our opinions. And so for me, a lot of the times, like reading King, reading Dorothy Day, reading Mahatma Gandhi, reading Nelson Mandela, like reading all these champions and saints of peace, I saw their posture as being ones that are of listening, and also going to the other side to reconcile, not being afraid, right, to call out the injustice, but at the same time be able to like, but the end goal is reconciliation. Like Christ's goal was reconciliation, right? And so, you know, Christ going non-violently to the cross, and in the hoping of reconciling humanity, you know, to himself and to God. And so I think we have to be very careful about, as much as like I love my brothers and sisters who are marching and speaking out, be careful not to become this hubris of, now I'm on the right side and then you're wrong, and like, let me tear you down, instead of offering like, no, like, how do we bring these people over? Because we need them just as much, right? Like, so do you have something for that?
I was just thinking about like the steps of
Yeah.
nonviolence. So Kingian nonviolence, there's a lot to it, but it's the two main pieces are the 6 principles of nonviolence, and then the 6 steps of nonviolence. And the principles are sometimes called the will, and then the steps are the skill. So like principle one, the principles of nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. I could go through the whole list, but it's just the powerful philosophy, the framework of the framework. Now the steps is, what are the steps for achieving justice, for organizing a peaceful campaign? And the very first step is information gathering. That's the very first step. I think now a lot of times when there's something that happens, the very first step is protest or direct action, right?
Yep.
So that doesn't come until step number 4, like in the Kenyan process. So information gathering is the first. What's going on? Like we have to understand the situation. And then the second step is education. Now we have to educate the people that we're trying to mobilize. And we talked about this the other day, the Montgomery bus boycott.
Yeah.
That's what happened. There were complaints of discrimination in the bus system in Montgomery. And so the first thing, Dr. King is in the leaders, they've learned, okay, what exactly is going on here?
Yeah.
And then they created materials and had town halls and stuff.
And
to educate people.
organizations, yeah.
Right. But then the third step is what Gandhi called self-purification. Right? It's like, okay, let me check myself before I enter into this full-blown, what could be a full-blown conflict.
Yeah.
Then step 4, I said direct action was step 4. No, number 4 is negotiation. So now you're going to the people who have the power, who you learned in the information gathering process, trying to negotiate, what you are wanting to happen, right? And if that breaks down, then you go to direct action. And the direct action should be strategic.
Yeah.
So like a protest, marching or being down to the courthouse, maybe that's the most effective direct action in a particular situation, maybe not. I mean, in Montgomery, they said, okay, the bus, there is discrimination on the buses.
Yep.
We are going to boycott the bus and hit them economically.
Yep.
And they did it for 380 some days or something. Like they did not use the bus. They would carpool, they walked, and finally that got them back to the negotiation table, and that they were able to get some things done, But the final step, step 6 is reconciliation.
Yeah.
So like victory, like if you can't have reconciliation, then okay, let's at least work for justice and get what should be happening to occur. But that's not you keep working until there's true reconciliation and true understanding and beloved community.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because you talk about, again, this idea of, even you see Jesus' life. And again, all these leaders, King, Gandhi, Dorothy Day, like all these people are reading about the life and the ministry of Jesus. And you see even just his the steps even within his life and in his ministry, right? And so, he was strategic of where he goes, right? Because he said, I only do what God's calling me to do. And like he would do miracles, not for the sake of just doing miracles, but to show like that he is the one who sent me, right? And so I think the hardest thing, I think it's more my age category now. The millennials and the Gen Zers, we're so passionate about justice that we don't really look at these models, these saints, the life of Jesus, who showed us like, no, guys, like we're not here to like just tear people down. Like we're here to like bring them like with us. Like we need all of us, right? And to build that beloved community. Like I need you guys. Like I can't do it on my own. And so I do believe like, and I truly do believe nonviolence, full word, is the best course of action in civil disobedience and things like that. But I also tell people, it's like, it's not nonviolence if you're still lashing out against if you're lashing out against people, that's not nonviolence. Like that's still a posture of violence, right? And so I think we just have to be aware of those steps and just not just jump to, well, we're gonna do this or we're gonna tear this down or whatever. So yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. So it's okay to have this fuel and passion to want to go after something, but it's better to take that moment to really, gather yourself. You said to gather the information, to reach out to those who are the organizations or individuals who can also help with these issues. But when it comes to that step, what are some of the things that we can do to, as you said before, like we have these houses and we have these homes, and those are like our safe haven, those are our barriers, those are our walls up. What are the steps and things that we can do to, kind of make that connection with somebody, to build towards that place of like, hey, okay, we want to gather this information, we want to work together, but I don't even know if I know how to talk to you, how to approach you.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes you just have to create something new and do something new. But other times it's, okay, where's God moving?
Yeah.
And then how can like just join in with them, right? And I think there's lots of places where that's happening. And I think what I've come to learn about this idea of beloved community is that I don't think that it happens at large scales.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because like at some point, like, I got like 2,000 Facebook friends.
He's
I don't-
flexing on.
I don't listen.
You know
Well,
those people?
no. So
He's popular.
I've been adding them up ever since the very beginning. of
Oh,
Facebook.
okay. Oh,
You were
okay.
like 4
Yeah, I was
years
like,
old or
oh,
something.
yeah, yeah.
No. But I got like 2,000. Some people got like 5. I don't know any of these people, man. But I know like 5 of them. But it's like at some point, like community gets so large where it's no longer community. This is the church, right? You see in the church, Acts 2, 42, 47. There's this community, and they're gathered around the table, and they're praying with each other, sharing meals and fellowshipping with one another. And like compare that to like the United Methodist Church, now that I'm a part of, and global, and and so I think that like what are those small communities who are doing it?
Yeah.
Because it's happening. Like, and I think that if we just say, oh, it's not happening, well, then you're not looking hard enough.
Right.
It is happening.
Yeah.
So I think that just trying to step into some of those situations, get out of your comfort zone, to get yourself around people who don't look like you, who don't think like you, who may not vote like you, from different cultures, from different religions. I mean, we've tried to do some of that even with the work that we're doing with our peace grannies and grandpas, is what we call them, peace family. It's like we've connected. Well, first Wayne Street United Methodist Church and Turner Chapel AME. The AME, first Black church in Fort Wayne, and the AME exists because of discrimination and racism in the Methodist Church. And so now we have those communities in relationship with each other. We went out to a mosque to try to learn about them and their culture, and a Burmese church over here. So just trying to like understand, because this is our community, and it's very easy to just put ourselves around these homogenous little groups of people who think and act and vote and look like us. And we're never going to grow as long as we keep doing that. And it's hard to have. Somebody else said this the other day, and he was quoting, I think he was quoting a politician, Chris Christie or something, which I can't say that I quote Chris Christie very often. But this particular quote I liked. He said something to the effect of, it's hard to hate up close.
Yeah, that's good.
It's hard to hate up close.
Oh,
So,
dang. Chris Christie.
Chris Christie. So,
But then you might have to fact check that.
but it's hard to hate up close, man.
Yeah,
It is. It
that's
is.
true.
We have so many opinions about issues, right? Like you can have an opinion about like LGBT stuff. Do you have a gay friend?
Yep.
Or somebody that like
Close to?
you can have you can have a strong opinion about DACA.
Yeah.
Or whatever, like we did 5-6 years ago, a panel discussion with DACA recipients from Fort Wayne, right? It was all this time where certain news stations were showing MS-13 gang members, stuff like that. We have like this group of young people that are leaders in the community doing good things. Like be in relationship with people. If you're gonna have strong opinions or beliefs about things, find people that are actually living that life and get to know them. and maybe things might change. So good.
I think, so for me, one of my heroes, Thomas Merton, and I got a tattoo on my arm to continue to remind me, is like, take more time, cover less ground. I think one of the hardest things that perpetually I have to fight against is the culture of like, I have to do more, or I have to grow more. And it's so interesting again, because for us who call Jesus our teacher, our Lord, our rabbi, he literally like emphasized like this life of like taking time to be with people and not rushing to the next thing, or not like, I love, I always tell a story, like, again, like they wanted to make Jesus king at one point, and the next point they're trying to throw him off a cliff. Like there's just like these different like things within humanity, but then a lot of times people were looking for him, and Jesus is like, well, I'm gonna get away, or I'm gonna be with this person, or I'm trying to get away, but then I stop and I see the crowd behind me and I take the time to be with them. And so I think it's not trying to amass. I think because we, again, this is my generation, I'm talking my generation, like we want to be content creators, we want to be seen, we want to amass. I think we think amassing a great following, like Angelo when his 2000s are friends, 5,000 friends. It's we think that's the best way, but I see Jesus in his grassroots small movement that ends up leading to something bigger, right? But it's so funny, like you see Jesus had his 3, his 12, the crowd, and the people who are like, at one point, they all just dipped on him. And he looks at his disciples like, where are you guys gonna leave too? And Peter says, where are we gonna go, Lord? Like, you have the words of life. And so I just think take the time to cultivate those relationships, take the time to develop those relationships, and keep your heart like away from bitterness and resentment. I think when you do take that time to like really come at peace with yourself and with others, like I know for me, there's so many times I'm going, and like the rush of bitterness kind of starts to seep into my heart. Like, they're not doing enough, they're not doing this, they're not doing this. And I'm always like, but then I'm always like, oh man, like I've become part of the problem. Like I've become just as violent in my words and my action, my mindset, because I'm like, they're not doing enough. They're not doing, I'm doing enough. Like, and so take the time, slow down. If someone's already doing the work, and like, you don't always have to create something new. Just join in what they're doing. What they're doing is amazing. And I don't have to do it. I could just jump on that and that bandwagon, and I can just support and love my brothers and what they're doing in the school, my brothers and sisters. And so I don't have to create something new. I can just slow down and be with them and do those. So yeah.
No, that's huge. No, that was good. You both spoke to us being uncomfortable sometimes and making that connection, living in a space of being okay with just those at the table with you. There may be other folks, there may be other tables, but it's okay to just take the time with the table that you're at and serve those that you're with at that table. But when it comes to, us getting out in the community, are there things that you guys know about that are happening that people can get involved with? Be it that maybe they come and be a volunteer with NeighborLink, or they join your teams, or other things that individuals can do?
Yeah, so we I mentioned the Peace family, the Peace grannies and grandpeace is part of that, but that all started with a group of folks at our church who were retired and wanted to do something to help to make a difference. And so we started just taking them to lunch at Southside, and from there have been lots of different volunteer opportunities that have come out of that, and so we've been just at Southside, but we haven't tried to recruit anybody. We've had maybe 40 or 50 that have been a part of that group at one time or another. But in the next few months, we're going to be really trying to expand that, because going into the other schools, we want to have a group that can, not just one group that can go to all the schools, but have a different group per school that can really dig in and say, if you have a lot of time to give, there's a lot of need in the schools.
Yeah.
And right now, as we speak, there's another conversation happening about one of the local elementary schools that have a big need for mentors in the school. And so we're trying to just do our part by calling them the Peace family. Anybody that wants to be about peace, work with us, and there's lots of needs in the school, and working directly with the school to say, hey, how can we come alongside? We've got some of them a couple of them that have about volunteered the special needs class at Southside. They'd like us to start coming every day for lunch, because there may be some kids that just don't want to go into the cafeteria. They just want to just go off into a classroom, have somebody that can sit down and just hear, listen to them, talk to them, or just be with them. So that's what we're doing. So if anybody's interested in being a part of that work, we're going to be making a pretty big push to recruit more people.
Yeah, I'd say definitely jump in on that. It's really awesome work. And then if you want to serve your community in a very practical way, NeighborLink is always looking for volunteers and neighbors that are just looking to lift up the vulnerable in our community. And so we also have this thing happening in the summer called Camp NeighborLink, and it's happening July 10th through 12th. And where we just inviting everyone from the city to come and just serve on those few days. If you've never done anything, service work or anything, we would love for you to be with us. You get free food and free merch. And well, yeah, it's just gonna be a sweet time to gather together and just serve our community. So.
Well, and just to add to that, I mean, naturally, we're gonna plug our own nonprofits
Right,
that we
right.
work for, but like, there's so many good things happening in this city,
Yeah.
and like, there's no excuse not to be involved, somehow with
Center for
something.
Nonviolence, like.
There's just a lot, and
It's like
I think sometimes it starts with, one of my favorite quotes is Howard Thurman, who's one of King's heroes, and when trying to make the world a better place, make the community a better place, like speaking to that idea, he said, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do that.
Yeah.
Because what the world needs is people who come alive. And so sometimes, just out of a desire to do something, we kind of put ourselves, a round peg in a square hole. Like, we try to fit it somewhere where we may not match our giftedness or what makes us come alive. So I think some of us may just need to do that work. What really makes me come alive, and where might the intersection of that be with needs that in our community? It's like, man, what if we all did that? If we all did that, I think we'd be okay. And there are lots of opportunities, lots of great organizations in the community to 501c3s and just grassroots things that are just happening on the ground. Lots of good stuff to get involved with.
Yeah, excited. Really excited.
Well, I want to now turn our space over to anybody in the audience who wants to ask a question to these gentlemen, be it online or in the room. Give you guys some time. I think we already just kind of answered that one. Says, I applaud you all for being great role models for servant leadership. Where do you guys need help, or how can our community show up for the work you're doing? Yeah.
I did have a question when it comes to, it is more of a practical question. I'm all about being, like, I love the word, like, it's part of the hate somebody who you're in a relationship. So how do what's a practical way that we can step outside of our comfort zone and spend time with people who we don't like? I'm trying to think of a better way to say that. If I don't like you, I don't want to be the same. So how can we, I guess, help each other mature to a place and a space where we can sit down and comfortably, in a non-violent way, space or no space, have a conversation with somebody who we just frankly just don't like. Like, damn, I don't like.
Me neither. I need space too.
So the question in the room was, how do we come along somebody or sit at the same table with someone whom we don't like?
Man, I think like one-on-one, I think there's like I probably wouldn't go to a Klan rally, But like, you sit down with one of those people, there
Yeah.
might be some hope for progress, and understanding. And I just think like, okay, like, who do you see or who do you know? Where you still feel safe, but like somebody that you just know, like, man, I don't agree with anything, just reaching out, say, hey, can we go get a drink, get coffee or lunch or something? I just want to get to know you, have some conversations, just try to understand each other. I know we disagree a lot, but I mean, I feel like that could go a long way. I mentioned, a couple of my friends, earlier, and like, it's not just the guys, they're like a polar opposites, like sides on pretty much everything, but they built this relationship, and they're both really passionate and both doing good work in the community. And so they have that mutual respect based on that. So I feel like there's a lot of power in that. And then out of that, because it's through individuals, you can have access to communities, right? If you and Dan, who can't stand each other, meet, one-on-one, you might, Dan maybe not, maybe it just ends there with that conversation, but that could be, that one-on-one could be Dan's introduction to your community, and your introduction into Dan's community, and I think that there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, a lot of people have a hard time with this, but read something that makes you uncomfortable. Read something that you would probably not read or even agree with. And again, I try to, I'm an avid reader, and you would go in my house, I have a shelf just of books, but I try to also pair that with something I know I'm gonna disagree with, but I want to be open enough to read it and to see like, okay, like how did this person get to this space, right? And how do they cultivate this mindset? Because I think part of even the division right now within America is like, we have become so tribalistic in the sense of, I belong to this party or this person's evil and it's like, again, if you call yourself a person of Christ and you're following in the life of Jesus, how many times did he go and sit in that space with people who did not agree with him, right? And then how many times was he actively, like, again, I tell people all the time, theologically, the Pharisees and Jesus actively, they probably agreed more than anything, but it was the fact that he was sitting down with the people that they could not stand to be around, or say like your teacher sits with sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes, like, what kind of teacher is this? And I think like it's so interesting, like when I read about the life of Jesus and I read other things, like he actively went and sought to be with other people who we would deem too far away from God or too far away from societal norms. So I actually try to make myself uncomfortable in certain situations.
Well, one thing I was thinking about was in Kingian nonviolence. So one of the things we teach about is Hegelian thinking, which is, you have the thesis, the antithesis, and then the synthesis. So like you have two like completely polar opposite views or understandings. There's likely some truth to be found somewhere in the middle, right? And this isn't to say like we need to just all adopt this like lukewarm, like everybody's opinion is valid. No, it ain't, not necessarily. but I think like even King's so pilgrimage to nonviolence is kind of a hard read, but it's a fascinating read. It was published as an independent essay, but it was also in his first book, one of the chapters, A Strive Toward Freedom. And he outlines his philosophy of nonviolence and how he got there, and all the different thinkers, and Jesus being one of them, Gandhi, but then like Rosenbach and these German philosophers, Hegel. Well, Hegel himself had some racist views, but King took the good, of what he thought was sound reasoning from this person that had some racist views, but he still, was able to learn and then extract the good and with all the other pieces and formulate what became his own unique philosophy of nonviolence.
Yeah.
So I think going into those relationships and conversations with that posture of like understanding and learning and like, I know there's some things that I'm right about here, but what can I learn or what am I missing? And I think if we go into it with that posture, it'll be, there's hope in that.
And for everybody who knows me, they know I'm a little bit slow, so I wanna just kind of throw that back so I can make sure I
Yeah.
understand. So from your perspective, the best way to do that is like you mentioned, do some research, find out for yourself. And then from that, identify somebody or something that basically makes you mad, gets your blood boiling off. And then find out why that is, that it rubs you the wrong way. And then reach out to somebody to understand that, so you can kind of better understand and be closer to somebody, so it makes it harder for your blood to boil, because it's not a concept, but it's a person that you're more frustrated with the concept than the person. And is that what I'm, that's kind of,
I think
I like action behind.
I think so. And like, one of the principles of nonviolence, third principle is attack forces of evil, not persons who are doing evil. So, but I think I want to be careful too, because I think it's an exercise in like, in privilege even
Yes.
to
Yes.
suggest that. It all depends on just like where you're at, like in your own journey, because like if a person or a group of people have done you so much harm and there's so much like pain and trauma, like, yeah, it may not be the move to reach out, because you might sit down at the table and they may cause further harm, so I don't think I think that's an issue of discernment.
And there's wisdom that goes into that, like,
Yeah.
and the self-awareness, right? Like, if I know for me, even just like, I had to take, like, coming out of like working at the church, I had to go to counseling. I had to work on just like, even just myself and something, because I wasn't ready to kind of deal with a lot of that stuff. So working in that inner violence too, I think, and I think you have to have some discernment. There's a sense of privilege to say, like, to tell someone to go to their oppressor and say, hey, go sit down with your oppressor and break bread with them.
Yeah.
And without them fully healing and working on the healing within themselves. So I think that, yeah, there just has to be just some discernment, some wisdom, some self-awareness, which some blind spots we all have, being aware of those, like, but I do think there's something beautiful about taking yourself out of a certain context. So that can even start by going to a different church that you would normally not go to, or a restaurant that you would normally not eat at, right? Or a bar that you would normally not drink at, right? So I think maybe some of those steps too could work. And you tell me if I'm wrong. I suggest to predominantly my brothers and sisters who are living a Christ-like life to, you're in a position of privilege right now because Christianity is kind of the norm. So doing kind of what Angela and them are suggesting of sitting down with a Muslim, sitting down with a Buddhist, sitting down with someone who, and you'd be very surprised when you do, how many more similarities and commonality that you have than not, right? You both are human beings made in the image of God. So I would suggest maybe some of those things, if that's any consolation, wisdom.
Oh, yeah, that was all good. That was good. Thank you so much. Yeah, again, in a lot of what you guys said and wrap it up, is kind of bring that same space of this uncomfortability. In order for us to really bridge these gaps between people that we don't necessarily see, as an equal, maybe working on those ways to find out how they are more equal than they are separate from us. A couple of other questions that we had online. Let's go back up here. It says, hello, thank you for having. What kind of support is out there for young men/women exiting the penal system that would help them refrain from returning to the lifestyle that got them arrested?
Man, so I don't know like the full answer to that. I know that that's the next phase of our work, and we're kind of in that about to enter into that to try to learn, what is out there. I know, we had a conversation, an initial conversation with, probation a couple years ago or a few years ago, and they're like, there's a lot of need for kids who are on probation, more need for kids in that phase than who are at lockup. Like there's some groups and some things that are happening at ACJC, but once they're in probation, there's a major gap in need there. That may have changed, between that conversation and now, but that's something that we're feeling more called to, is like the next phase of the work that we're doing. So we're in the schools. But those kids that are caught like kind of 1 foot in ACJC, or they're in probation, or Nebraska, the alternative school, and like they're bouncing back and forth, and like, that top, 10%, like most at risk in our community, having something really